Gosh, it must be hard to be a good guy all the time. You have to always be a symbol of peace and justice and never do anything fun. Heroes are just expected to always use the crosswalk, know the difference between a salad fork and a regular fork, and always refill the soap dispensers when they're empty. It all sounds exhausting. That must be why so many heroes have eventually turned evil. This is especially true of Marvel heroes, who seem to not be able to go 5 minutes without going insane, being mind controlled, or meeting an alternate dimension version of themselves or something. Take a look at our video of Marvel heroes who broke bad, coming at you right now. Wolverine has been around so long that him turning evil or sort of evil is a common occurrence. He's already a difficult person to get along with in general, so him turning into a bad guy sometimes isn't that hard of a stretch. There are a ton of instances that we could pull from where our favorite Canadian mutant goes a little off the rails. But our favorite version of an evil Wolverine is the Earth 295 version, which basically became a more evil version of Apocalypse. This version of Wolverine was sent to investigate a spaceship and kill everyone inside, but ended up disappearing for 10 years. When he returned, he was now Weapon Omega, an heir to Apocalypse who had been upgraded with celestial tech and was basically a crazed genocidal warlord. In this form, Wolverine was almost unstoppable, and it makes us afraid if our Wolverine ever truly went evil for good. If we had a nickel for every time our best friend and partner was killed, but then over 30 years later, we just found out they were cryogenically frozen, brainwashed, and turned into a super assassin, we'd have like 6 nickels. Sure, the story to bring Bucky Barnes back from the dead was a bit of a head-scratching jump through multiple hoops, but overall it was worth it to have such a great character back in the comics. Although he started off as Captain America's sidekick until the plane he was on supposedly incinerated him, we should instead call him Lucky Barnes because some kind Russians were nearby who kidnapped him, gifted him an awesome new bionic arm, and then turned him into the deadly assassin known as the Winter Soldier. It's by far the best relationship that Captain America has in both the comics and on the big screen. But Bucky Barnes' turn to villainy is nothing compared to the jaw-dropping reveal that Captain America was actually a secret Hydra agent the whole time. Okay, the situation is a lot more complicated than that, with it eventually being revealed that a small child created when fragments of the cosmic cubes fused together actually was responsible for rewriting all of Captain America's memories to make him believe he'd grown up as the ultimate Hydra sleeper agent. Yeah, it's a weird revelation, but it still gave us the huge gut punch of hearing Captain America utter those 2 iconic words we never thought he'd say. Hail Hydra. It was an incredible controversial story because although the writers swore this wasn't some trick or ruse, it was hard to believe that this was the same Captain America we first met fighting Nazis and punching Hitler in the face. One of the only live-action characters to make this list, Baron Mordo from Doctor Strange deserves a spot here just because of the excellent change to his comic book origins. In the comics, Mordo is already a bad guy by the time Doctor Strange hits the scene. The movie version is much different, and although some suspected Baron Mordo to be revealed as a secret bad guy in the film, it seemed like he was a generally good guy, who, after having his belief in the Ancient One shattered, set out on a more villainous path. This is a great thing because if Marvel plays its cards right, it could have the 3rd Doctor Strange movie be all about the conflict between Strange and the newly evil Mordo, having successfully set up their rivalry in previous films. It would give the whole movie much needed depth on top of more trippy magic fights. Jean Grey is the reason we make a video like this. She's a prime example of a hero that turned into a huge villain, with the Dark Phoenix saga being one of the most well-known and celebrated X-Men stories of all time. Jean Grey is just minding her own business while off in space when suddenly she's exposed to deadly radiation, which unleashes her true potential as a telekinetic telepath. Say that 5 times fast. With this, she eventually becomes the Dark Phoenix as the massive amount of power corrupts her more and more. She's a scary force to be reckoned with and eventually departs to a different galaxy where she's so strong that she devours the energy of a star, causing a supernova that kills the entire population of a nearby planet. Overall, it's an amazing story, which is why it's so baffling that we've had 2 subpar X-Men film adaptations about it. We all cheer when we get to see Hulk smash puny gods and faceless robots, but what would happen if Hulk wasn't on our side? We'd be terrified. How could we stop a not-so-jolly green giant from taking over the world? Sing him lullabies? Bring him hot milk? Who knows? It's best that we're prepared for these situations, and back in the 90s, there was a comic book run that saw an alternate future where Hulk possessed Bruce Banner's intelligence along with Hulk's more violent personality traits. The results were deadly. The comics told a story where, about 100 years into the future, nuclear war had wiped out nearly everyone, and the Hulk had been driven even more powerful, yet insane, thanks to the radiation. Due to this, he took over the entire world and acted as its dictator with practically no one to oppose him. Let's hope this never comes true. If there's any hero we should fear becoming more like their comic book counterpart, it's Scarlet Witch. Although in the MCU, Scarlet Witch's powers are incredibly vague and ill-defined, so she can, mind control people, but mostly just lifts things with her telekinesis, we guess? In the comics, her powers are much more reality-bending, with her being powerful enough to rewrite and change the world in a way she sees fit, which is a pretty scary power for any person to have. Being that powerful has to take a toll, and that's exactly what happened in the Avengers Disassembled and House of M storylines, as Wanda slowly suffered a mental breakdown and went a little crazy. Although everyone tries to either help her or stop her, Scarlet Witch just proves to be too powerful, and by simply saying, "No more mutants," she was able to rewrite reality and take away almost all mutant powers across the universe. Yikes. The first thing they should teach you in school is to not mess with weird alien substances. It's something that Peter Parker should have definitely thought before he started dabbling with a new black suit comprised of space goo. In the comics, his original costume is damaged, and he pokes around Mr. Fantastic's lab until he stumbles upon the symbiote, which forms around his body and gives him all that black chic. At first, it's a great costume, and Peter doesn't have any issues with it. But as he gets more aggressive with his crime fighting and acting like a general jerk to his friends and family, he thinks to himself, hey, maybe letting black space tar form around my body wasn't the best option. Of course, we learn the suit is a sentient symbiote, and after Peter finally is able to separate himself from it, it eventually finds a new friend in Eddie Brock, who becomes Venom. Comic book bad guys always have the most interesting origins. While Professor X and Magneto were locked in one of their never-ending battles, Professor X used his powers to render Magneto catatonic. Somehow, with some scientific mumbo-jumbo, the darker aspects of Magneto's mind escaped into Xavier's subconscious and then merged with Xavier's darker nature and grew into a separate entity known as Onslaught. So it's basically like Professor X and Magneto had a baby that was pure evil and caused a massive amount of collateral damage. At first, Onslaught was tethered to Xavier's mind, but eventually broke free to be his own separate entity. Since Onslaught had all of Professor X's darker thoughts, it had some pretty inappropriate memories, including one where Professor X was attracted to Jean in the X-Men's early days. See, Professor X, you gotta be careful whose mind you start invading. You never know what could happen. You ever look into a mirror and freak out over what you might become? Well, you'll be happy to know that you're not alone. Adam Warlock is the exact same way, with the minor detail of what he might become being an evil, all-powerful galactic tyrant. There are a lot of versions of Magus, but they're all evil versions of Adam from the future that Adam has to constantly fight to not turn into. The first Magus stemmed from Adam Warlock going insane and emerging from his protective cocoon with even more powers and rocking a sick afro. It was this Afro-Magus that formed his own religion and ruled a theocratic empire for quite a long time. But of course, this future Magus had to ensure his own creation, so he went back in time to try to drive his younger self insane and secure his own evil future. It was an awkward reunion, to be sure. After a magic spell was cast that inverted personalities and morals, the whole world was turned upside down. How crazy were things altered? Well, for one, Deadpool became a pacifist called Zenpool, which tells you how insane everything got. Tony Stark was affected as well, and he became a greedy capitalist without the moral center and heart we've come to know him for. Besides being a general jerk, he modified the Extremis virus into a drug that people could take that allowed them to be in perfect health and forever youthful. But they all had to pay $100 a day for it. Even when things were reverted back to normal, he protected himself with a shield in his suit, and this new, villainous Iron Man's adventures were chronicled in a new comic series titled Superior Iron Man. It made us miss the kind-hearted Tony Stark we've come to know and love. We know it's hard to believe, but did you know Cyclops is actually an interesting character in the comics and not just some love-struck third wheel who isn't even worthy of a proper on-screen death like his big-screen counterpart from the original X-Men film series? Yeah, we're still salty about that. It's a shame that the general public has this image of Scott Summers burned into their memories because Cyclops is actually one of the most fascinating X-Men characters, which is really saying something. Though a lot of times he's portrayed as a do-gooder in the comics, the most interesting stories are when his beliefs are challenged, like when he found out his hero, Professor X, was into some shady stuff. Slowly, Cyclops started to break bad and became more and more ruthless, eventually losing control and killing Professor X while possessed by the Phoenix Force. Not permanently, of course, because comics, but it was still a shocking moment. Harry Osborn is a troubled character forever influenced by the actions of his father, Norman Osborn. In every iteration of the character, both in comics and in live action, Harry starts off as a friend to Peter Parker who eventually succumbs to villainy. In the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, Harry Osborn blames Spider-Man for murdering his father in seemingly cold blood, and this sets him on a path of vengeance that leads him to becoming a new version of the Green Goblin. But Harry, come on, your dad looked like Willem Dafoe. Of course he was a bad guy. But Harry just won't listen to reason, and his hatred for Spider-Man only grows. But when he finds out his best friend Peter and his archenemy Spider-Man are one and the same, it forces Harry to reevaluate everything. Yet his love for his dad is just too strong, so Harry embraces his new villain role. We all know Reed Richards, aka Mr. Fantastic, aka hopefully destined to be portrayed by John Krasinski in a future movie, as an upstanding comic book character dedicated to science, justice, and all that good stuff. He's one of the smartest heroes of them all, and with his brilliant intellect, we're pretty happy he's on our side. But what if he wasn't? Our world's Mr. Fantastic is a hero, but over on Earth 1610, Reed Richards took a much darker path. After Sue Storm declines his marriage proposal because, really, who wants to be married to a human stretch machine, Mr. Fantastic descends into villainy by killing his family and teaming up with some evil aliens. It's clear to everyone that Reed has become a threat who now wishes to leave his home dimension and wreak havoc on other worlds. He soon takes the mantle of Maker and becomes one of his parallel world counterparts' greatest enemies. We should be thankful that the Aquaman movie made so much money for DC, because now Marvel might be more willing to finally bring the famous Namor the Submariner to the big screen. But will he be a hero or a villain? Looking at his comic history, it could really go either way. In the past, he's been more of an anti-hero whose actions stem more from his general hatred of humanity and loyalty to Atlantis, but recently his character has made the turn into more of a full-fledged villain, with him declaring war on the surface world and even attempting to murder a former Avengers hero named Stingray. And no, this wasn't just some revenge for Steve Irwin's death. He beat Stingray to a pulp and then sent sharks to finish him off. Is this really the actions of someone once considered a hero? We don't think so. Everyone knows that the best way to turn a hero into a villain is to take what they hold dear. Nothing creates a villain faster than a broken heart and a deep depression. Which is why it's understandable that the X-Men Angel was so quick to turn into a baddie after he lost his sweet angel wings. We mean, if you had a pair of strapping, majestic feathered wings on your back, wouldn't you be upset if you lost them? Angel certainly was. After an accident, the mutant Warren Worthington III, aka Angel, had to have his wings amputated, which drove Angel to serious despair. You know how much gas money he saved by not having to drive to work? Anyway, after he lost them, he started spiraling, which made it easy for Apocalypse to swoop in and make Angel one of his 4 evil horsemen by promising to give him a better set of wings. A dying Otto Octavius swapping bodies with Peter Parker and becoming the superior Spider-Man is the most comic booky sentence we can think of. And this wasn't just for a quick one-off comic story either. Otto Octavius became Spider-Man, and determined to prove he could do Spider-Man's job better, actually tried to become his own version of the hero. But from an outside perspective, it just looks like Spider-Man became more of a jerk. Of course, all good things must come to an end, and after Otto became a full-fledged hero, he had to give up his control of Peter's body in order to stop the Green Goblin. After that, Otto eventually turned back into a villain, so this was an instance of a villain becoming a hero, which only made the hero seem more like a villain, only for the villain turned hero to turn back into a villain again. Make sense? Sure, Spider-Man might have the strength of a jacked up spider, but can we stop for a moment and recognize how cool the superhero known as Sentry's abilities are described? After consuming the Golden Sentry Serum, Robert Reynolds gained the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. If that doesn't make you smile, we don't know what will. As the Sentry, Robert Reynolds inspired hope and optimism, but soon found himself up against his greatest enemy, the Void. which was a powerful monster. Sadly, Sentry realized that the Void was just the dark aspect of his own powers, and the Sentry basically spends his whole life constantly at war with the Void, hoping it doesn't take over. Sometimes he's successful, but no matter what, it always seems like the Void is merging with Sentry, causing immense damage and destruction everywhere he goes. It's a sad life for a hero who started off as a symbol of peace. There are only a handful of good reasons to turn evil in life, like finding out too late that there's no toilet paper in the bathroom, stubbing your pinky toe on your coffee table, and demonic possession. Since Daredevil has super senses, we're pretty sure the first two could never happen to him, so it's a shame that a demon found his way into Matt Murdock's body thanks to the Snake Root clan. But even before that, Daredevil was towing the line of full-fledged villainhood when he was able to gain control of the Hand to stop Kingpin from seizing it. Slowly, he turned the Hand into his own personal army and let them become more and more violent while trying to stop criminals in Hell's Kitchen. It was the classic villain motivation of "let me conquer everything so I can save everything" mindset that befell Daredevil, forcing his other hero friends to step up and put a stop to his madness. The MCU has a weird relationship with Hawkeye. He's long been one of the worst handled heroes, and every time Marvel tries to correct it, they just sideline him even more. Hopefully that changes in the future, but now let's talk about the original Avengers movie's worst mistake, turning Hawkeye evil for almost all of it. We had barely gotten to know Clint Barton before Loki turned him into a hypnotized zombie for almost the entire movie, and we saw him do evil things like shoot Nick Fury and take down an entire helicarrier with one arrow. It was such a disappointment that even Jeremy Renner asked for Hawkeye to be killed off because he didn't agree with where they were taking his character. Thankfully, Marvel got better in how they handled Hawkeye, making him a fan favorite, and yet they still leave him out of the Marvel opening sequence. Well, that's our list of the best Marvel characters who turned to the dark side. Which heroes were you the saddest to see break bad? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to CBR for more awesome superhero content. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.